I'm Alice Alicia Jones, and I welcome you to our seventh Facebook Live. Today's topic is on positive thinking. It's basically one of my favorite uh, subjects. It has a wonderful, it's had a wonderful effect in my life. It has always had I've always been very prone to positive thinking, even when I didn't necessarily feel very positive. I always fell back on doing something with my life that I felt was really uh, important that I stay in a vein that was going to reflect positively. And I'd like to share with you some of my experiences and why positive thinking is so important. I just came back from Cyprus. I'm still in jet lag, so I apologize if uh, I'm not as clear as I have been in the past because of the fact that I just get uh, I didn't I didn't realize that there is so much uh, that the time does make a huge difference. And anyway, when I started to think about this, I went back to one of my earliest memories, and when I started to think about this subject, and I realized that there was a period in high school where I had a thought that went through my head. And that thought was pretty debilitating. It said, and I heard it loud and clear, this voice inside my head that said, "You will never get what you want. So settle for what you can get." And that thought stayed with me through my 20s, through my 30s, into my 40s, until I started to think about it critically and say, wait a minute, this is not true. What do you mean I will never get what I want? One of the major things that I wanted in my life was to graduate from the University of Michigan. And against terrific odds, because I was married to a first husband at that time who believed and whose mother also believed that SUNY, State University of New York, was good enough for me. And so I felt, okay, I never commented on their feelings of what they thought I should do is to stay in New York because that's where we were living at the time. And all I kept thinking of is the fact that I want to graduate from the University of Michigan. Um, I had married a man that between my junior and senior year, and now it was the our life had taken us back to New York State, but that didn't mean that I couldn't achieve my dream. And so I continued to just hold the thought inside my head that this is what I want to do. I want to go back to the University of Michigan and get my degree from there. And as it turned out, I was one semester late. I didn't go back in the fall as I should have. I went back in January and so graduated because they were on a trimester program and graduated uh, in the second semester, which was the end of August. So my degree would have finished uh, normally in April, but I was really very adamant about holding on to that thought. So this is one of the uh, this is one of the examples of you taking something that you really, really, really want, fixing it in your mind, and having it stay there as a permanent fixture so that it doesn't matter what the obstacles are for you, you will overcome them. You will take and make those obstacles disappear because of the fact that you are determined to achieve something. This could be for a young couple, this could be a new home. This could be a um, having a child. This could be a change of career. It could be going to a particular college when it feels like everything is not going to work. And it doesn't matter what you feel is against you, you don't have to succumb to it. So I do want you to really just embed that into your psyche that you can get what it is that you want, provided that you take and hold on to the thought that of what it is that you're after. Um, Another thing that when I started to challenge my own thinking, that I realized is that I was adamant about getting a into a particular type of home. Our first home was a townhouse, which was great for a first house. Our second home was a bi-level. Even though it was a beautiful bi-level, it took it was still a bi-level. You walked into an entrance foyer and a family room, a nursery, and a master bedroom was on the first floor. You walked up an entire set of stairs for the living room, dining room, kitchen, and three additional bedrooms, one of which was my office. My husband thought that that would, this is my second husband at this point, thought that we would live and die there. He loved to play king of the mountain. The house was located on an acre of land. Um, I did give, I had both of my children in that house. And the irony to the neighborhood is that it was filled with retirees. When we moved into the neighborhood, there were 20 children. When we moved out of the neighborhood 10 years later, my two were the only children in the neighborhood. I was determined to get a new home. What I was after was a four-bedroom colonial with a first floor family room, a large kitchen, as large as I could get, a double car garage, and a full basement. I wanted the children to have a massive playroom, and I figured we could finish the basement off ourselves. In 1981, when my daughter was born, the real estate market had just about collapsed because of the fact that the housing market had been driven up by subprime mortgages, which frankly should have been illegal but weren't. And so that drove the prices of real estate up to astronomical appreciation rates. And many people were buying homes that absolutely couldn't qualify for them, couldn't pay the bills. And then everything went crashing down. And so effectively, um, in 1991, um, I'm sorry, in 1981, um, I take it back. It wasn't that the real estate market had collapsed yet at that time. My own personal life had collapsed financially, at that time. And which again is the subject of another story. But I absolutely felt that I couldn't succumb to the tragedy and literally at that time, my life started to feel like a Greek tragedy um, because of the fact that I had not only had to give up the real estate firm that we had spent 8 years growing, but and developing, but I was also pregnant with my first child. Uh, and effectively, when we closed the doors to the real estate office, we effectively took, gave all our agents, said goodbye to all of them, relicensed out of our home, and my husband took another job. And I then just became he stayed as the property manager of the company. He stayed as the principal broker, and I worked as the property manager. So I did have at least some income, but not nearly enough to pay our bills. But nevertheless, I knew that I had to find a way to keep going and not succumb to like I said, to this Greek tragedy that my life had all of a sudden become. Um, because I had this beautiful, bright, shiny eyed little person that was totally dependent on me. And the beauty of having a child at one of the lowest financial points of our life is the fact that every time I felt any kind of sadness or heartache or anything over what had happened, um, I looked over at her and she was always smiling. And she had these, not only this beautiful smile, but these wonderful bright eyes. And it was like the light of God came right through her features. So I think that was my reward in that period, even though it didn't necessarily feel very rewarding at the time. But the other thing that was happening in my life, my mother, who had been dying of cancer, uh, or had been diagnosed with cancer in the previous year, died 11 days prior to the birth of my first child. So it's like I said, I literally felt as if my life was lying in tatters around me, and I, in absolutely insisting that I maintain my ability to hold on to the um, a way to keep going without succumbing to what was happening on a daily basis to me, I I turned to a book, and that book was The Power of Positive Thinking. And the beauty of that book was that it gave me enough information to at least allow me to calm me down, to allow me to sleep at night. And I ended up rereading that book 6 times. I underlined it, I highlighted it, I starred it, I underlined it in black, in red, in yellow, and everything. I also that probably started the germ of my own book, which is called Own Your Power Day by Day. It has 365 meditations in it, and there is a meditation. Each meditation is either 1, 2, or 3 pages long. And each meditation is upbeat, uplifting, and healing. And for those of us who are out there and need a boost for the day, it's an absolutely fantastic vehicle because it fits today's lifestyle. It's designed to be read quickly, and it's designed to give you a, reflection uh of something else to think about for the day. So, anyway, um, to get back to the new home that I wanted, when the children when my son was born in 1984. In 1986, I found a subdivision that was, um, a very lovely new subdivision. It was called South Run, and they had just put a sign in the ground. Former neighbors of ours actually called me and said, "Look, you can come and move out to where we are. Will this has just been announced?" And in 19 I think the subdivision started in 1984, but by the time it finally uh, allowed by the time we felt confident enough to go purchase ourselves, it was 1986. And the beauty with buying in here is that we did give up our acre of land. We got a half acre, but the community had a pool, and the beauty of the subdivision was that at that first year when our children lined up to go to school, they there were 28 children at the bus stop at the corner, and it was just absolutely fantastic because that was one of my motivations for moving, was to have playmates for my kids, because up to that point, everything had to be arranged by me. I had to always arrange a play date, pick up a child, bring the child back, or have the parent come get the child. So it just made it very, very difficult. And this was so easy. My children, it took them a while to kind of figure out that for them to go play, all they had to do was step outside. Somebody would see them and come outside and play with them. So that was the beauty of having this living in this neighborhood. We also, at the time that I was going through such a difficult time financially, my mother, who had been diagnosed with cancer, ovarian cancer, the year before, had been given 1 to 3 years to live. And she managed to survive almost a year to the date. And Polish people always find a way uh, to effectively kind of predict what is going to happen in their life. And she said that there was one year that her son, my brother Tony, had given her Easter lilies. And so a beautiful pot of Easter lilies. And the day after Easter, all of them died, all at one time. And so, in her mind, that translated into the fact that she would die around Easter time. And sure enough, she did. I think at that point, it was maybe a week after Easter that she passed away. But I had to go to the funeral 9 months pregnant. And my sister, Krisha, who was pregnant with her second son, who then ended up having her baby on July 21st, which was my mother's birthday. She had the baby by C section, so she could actually set the date herself. She was able to have her child born as on my mother's birthday as a tribute to my mother, which I thought was very, very lovely. Um, I do know too that one of the things that I absolutely was never secure about was with my first husband was whether or not I could have a child because there were so many problems in the marriage that all I kept thinking of is the fact that I can't have, I can't bring a baby into this world in this kind of circumstance. So the thing with the the fact that my second husband absolutely adored children and wanted children right from the beginning gave me the impetus to have a child and gave me the courage to have a child because and I knew I didn't want just one, that I wanted two. And we ended up, having two children, having a daughter first and then having a little boy second, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So effectively, the like I said, my first point in this is for you to just remember that you do not have to presume you cannot get what you want. And there's the next point that I wanted to bring forward for you was, what do you love to do? Because effectively, people each come to the planet with a soul contract for something, some mission that they are to accomplish, that they're to bring forward, that they're to finish. And it could be something completely unique to themselves. It could be something that the family started. For example, the Bach family. Effectively, the father uh, was a musician, and every one of the children were musicians. The Strauss family, the father was a musician, the children were musicians. And so sometimes when a soul has chosen very, very wisely, he gets born into a family that totally supports the work that they've chosen for themselves. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And this is going back with my first husband. Uh, the it was a period of tremendous instability for us. I was given a roll of coins and basically told to get a job anywhere in the world and or anywhere in the United States, not anywhere in the world, anywhere in the United States, and he would follow. And I I looked at that roll of coins and I thought to myself, well, what do I do now? But what happened to me was the fact that I was forced to take that roll of coins and to evaluate what it was that I loved. What did I love to do? I had graduated from the University of Michigan as an English major. And all I knew at that point is that I loved to talk about great ideas. I loved to write. I loved um, to discuss things with others about the philosophical thought, and I loved to talk. So effectively, I then realized that my life would probably have to revolve around some type of career that allowed me to speak. And the irony is for the three major careers that I've had, the first one was as a first grade teacher. I did that for 3 years. And as uh, I absolutely uh, loved the role of a teacher. The only thing was that I had come into a tiny little town in New York State in the Catskill Mountains. It was called South Fallsburg. I had applied for the only professional position that I felt the town had to offer, which was a bank teller's position. And as the gentleman is looking over my resume, um, he looks at me and looks at my resume, looks at me, looks at my resume, and says, "Do you think you could teach first grade?" And with the greatest amount of courage that I could muster, I said, "Of course I can." And then he introduced me to his best friend, who was the supervising principal of both a high school and an elementary school. It was called Tri Valley. And I was hired as a first grade teacher because I just happened to come into a town, uh, or live close to a town. The position was in Grahamsville in New York, and the school was going to open in 1 week, and they needed a first grade teacher. And I, like I said, I happened to be the best qualified person to be there. My saving grace for that, it's like somehow God and God's angels protect us. And when I stop to think of the fact that I was given the teacher who had retired, I was given her lesson plans. And effectively, I had a blueprint of how to teach first grade because without those lesson plans, I'm not sure I could have done as outstanding of a job as I did. With the lesson plans, I was able to um, effectively sort my day into 15-minute segments. And each uh, child then was given exactly what they needed. There was a time when I can remember the very first day of school. We were there, I think, 3 days or 4 days before the children arrived, and the next I hadn't opened my lesson plan yet. Because I had so much to do to get the room ready for the children to come. And so the one of the other two teachers bounded into my class, and she mentioned something about pre-primer. And after she left, she introduced herself, welcomed me, and after she left, I put my head on the desk and I said to myself, "What's a pre-primer?" Um, like I said, I hadn't opened my lesson plan book yet, so wasn't exactly sure, but realized that they were the very simple little books that were introduced to the children prior to having them introduced to a larger book. And the little books, all they had the same words, um, reinforced over and over and over. And of course, these were the times of Dick, Jane, and Spot, which is the way that most of us have learned how to read. But besides this teaching first grade, the other major career that I had for 1 year was a uh, placement counselor with Pat Gilbert Personnel, and I was doing because I know when I moved to Washington D.C., I came in thinking that with a degree in English from the University of Michigan, that I was highly employable. And when instead, every single place that I went to search for employment looked at my resume, but they only really basically asked two questions: how fast can you type, and how accurate are you? So effectively, I then recognized that um, I was in trouble because I really couldn't I wasn't crazy about typing. I knew how to type, but I think the first test I took, if I remember correctly, 32 words a minute with 10 errors. And and of course, those were the times when um, even though, yes, you could have a really expensive typewriter, you still had to make all the erasures by hand. And because self correcting typewriters still hadn't come into vogue yet. So instead, I got a position with Pat Gilbert Personnel as placing sweet young things just like me who were not qualified to really function in the business world because they didn't have the skills that most people were looking for. But anyway, that took me through the first 1 year, and then I answered an ad as a real estate broker, and that took me through the next 25 years of my life, and in fact, to the point where I should say actually 45 years because I still have a real estate license, broker's license. And we still manage a very small property management company. My husband does 99% of the work. I do about 1%, which gives me the freedom to do this, which is my third major career, which was an intuitive counselor, working as a psychic, working as a healer, and working as uh, in the spiritual realm, because effectively that is what the direction my life was going in is working in the spiritual realm. And that brings me to my next point is what secret drives you? Because I feel that every single one of us has a special mission on this life. And some of us don't really feel that we are can do it, can fulfill that special mission. I know myself, um, even when I was in college, yes, I loved the major that I had chosen for myself, which was English. And I minored in history and psychology and speech and drama. Loved every one of those subjects too. But where my heart sang and where it's like it took my breath away was when I was doing any kind of reading or talking about the spiritual work that Duke University was doing. They were working with spoon bending. They were working with games of chance and people being able uh, to read, uh, intuit cards, and so they were doing a lot of things that they were bringing to the surface that really weren't very um, well known. This was the 60s, and I know that I can remember in the 80s when I went looking for a certain book on a certain subject that I think it was a book on angels, and it was the early 80s. I I was sent to a section of the public library that said occult. And I looked at that and I thought, a cult for angels? And, at least I would have thought that that might have been under religion. But anyway, every single thing that was spiritual was starting to draw me. And in the 80s, everything spiritual started to explode on this planet. Before, when I started looking for books on angels, could barely find one. Now there's probably there could be up to 500 a year being published on angels right now, and on different spiritual messages. I also recognized that I had shelved my interests in everything spiritual, as I tried to pursue my real estate career. So effectively, I got away with that for a while, but well into my 40s, um, spirit started to really kind of put the brakes on and say, okay, that is not what you came here to do. That is not what you're going to stay. Uh, we're not going to allow you to get away from your soul contract. And everything that interested me and excited me and everything I loved about real estate started to fall away. I started to go on appointments that bored me to death. And I can remember that I kept hearing the same, what I thought were stupid questions. And it made no sense to me. And so effectively, uh, I had to come, I had to get past a certain ego barrier that I had up to that point. And that ego barrier was that I became the president of a property management company that we called Alden Enterprises. My husband stayed as president of Townsend Homes just to keep it going, but I no longer wanted to work for Townsend Homes. I no longer wanted to do all the work that I had been doing. So I took on a partner, and by taking on a partner, I changed the name and then became the president of that company. That fed my ego, and I had to get over that because it took me 6 years to finally recognize that this is not necessary. This is not what I came here to do, and it wasn't making me happy. So I pulled out of that enterprise. Um, what what we have to remember, and in staying positive, and in going and pulling out a secret desire, a secret drive, a secret that we're only maybe not even willing to face ourselves, is that came from our soul. That came from that part of us that is attached to God. And so, effectively, um, the fact that I loved all things spiritual, that wasn't just a passing fancy. That wasn't just an interest that was going to um, fade after a while. And so I had to accept that part of myself. The next point that I wanted to make, which is very, very important in staying positive, we are magnetic beings. We are pure energy, we're vibration. And the frequency that we send out of ourselves is the same frequency that we get back. And we have to take and accept the fact that what we think about is what we bring about. What we think about materializes for us. And now it materializes for us faster and faster and faster. It before, time moved at a much slower pace. Now time has sped up to the point that it seems like things happen at such a rapid pace that it almost um, makes us recognize that we cannot um, think about negative things and expect positive results. We can't do it. Maybe we could get away with that in the past. Maybe we could wallow in our uh, place of unhappiness, but now we have nothing that is giving us a reprieve. So effectively, there is a wonderful book out there that made a huge impression on me. It is called Power versus Force, and it speaks about the levels of consciousness. The author is deceased, but I had the good fortune of meeting him before, maybe 10 years ago. So this is before he died, obviously. And he talks about the levels of consciousness. And what he mentions is guilt, blame, and shame are the three levels of consciousness that are on the lowest possible scale. And guilt, blame, and shame is what a lot of the world revolves around. And so I encourage you to understand when guilt, blame, or shame, which and on the level of consciousness, the way he describes it, measure 10, 20, and 30 on the scale of consciousness. When you're stuck in a loop of those three emotions, you are stuck in a place of the lowest type of thinking. So effectively, um, get out of it. Just get out of it. The I just to emphasize the fourth point. Don't send out negative thinking and expect positive results. Einstein had a quote that basically said that you cannot fix a problem with the same mindset that caused it. And so, effectively, if you're constantly sending out negative thinking, and but yet you want everything around you to remain positive, that is not going to happen. And so you have to remember that you absolutely have to change that. That again is in this book, Own Your Power Day by Day. It helps you get back on a positive track. It's absolutely magnificent in terms of the uh, of having you shift your thinking from a negative way of thinking to a positive way of thinking, because effectively what it wants you to do is to take responsibility for everything that happens in your life and find a way to make it work for you. So, anyway, the last point that I wanted to make was to focus and concentrate on the results that you want. Abraham Hicks is one of my favorite authors, and Esther Hicks, channels Abraham, which is a collective consciousness in the spiritual realm. And she makes a statement that she says, take if out of 100 things in your life, if 99 things are going wrong for you and one thing is going right, take that one thing and make it your the thing that you focus and concentrate on. Think only about the one thing that's going right. And I obviously um, have had to train myself to do that because there was a period where no matter what was going wrong, I would glom onto that and replay it in my mind and constantly harp on it and feel like I, it was almost as if it were a type of self flagellation, that if I thought about it long enough and hard enough, I could make myself feel bad enough. And so, therefore, I would somehow or other pay for the fact that I screwed up. And th- that just doesn't work. So, effectively, I just absolutely encourage you to change, any if you think that way, change that, get rid of that. The In focusing and concentrating on the results that you want, you have got to remember, though, there's several things that are very, very important with this. You have to do your due diligence. Whatever it is that you're starting out, whatever new venture that you're starting on, whatever it is that you want to accomplish, research it. The Right now with the internet, through the power of the internet, there's absolutely nothing that can't be found. I it's absolutely amazing. I know research takes time, and we sometimes we make decisions, and we're so quick to make decisions before we take and research the pros and cons of what it is, or at least knowing what it is that we're getting into. This doesn't I do not mean for this to discourage you from taking a new uh, path, but I do want you to know the pros and cons of what it is that you're after. And if you, for example, want to hire somebody and you don't know a thing about them, at least go in the internet and see, what they're about, and see if you can find anything on them. If you want to do a new venture, um, writing a book is a very big venture, um, which leads me right into the second point. Be prepared to work hard. You cannot accomplish anything by just laying back and saying, fix it, fix it. You can think about your end result. That is absolutely important. That's critical. But there are multiple, multiple, multiple steps to take while you're having to write your book. And so, effectively, taking those steps, breaking them down into bite sized pieces, taking the steps on a day to day basis is what's going to make the difference for you. Starting something, shelving it for months or years, and then starting it again, shelving it, starting it, shelving it again is not going to do the trick for you. So please put an investment in time. Try to do it daily. Try to work on something at least seven, if not 7 days a week, certainly 5 days a week. So give yourself 2 days off. Um, and it's interesting that Julia Cameron she wrote a wonderful book called The Artist's Way. And she was Martin Scorsese's second wife. And one of the things that she said is in her book is that she can unblock you. She knows how to because, again, from the things she experienced. I know that when I did the exercises in her book, she had, I filled up a yellow tablet, legal sized yellow tablet, front and back, so that with the answers to the questions that she had us work on, most of them designed to excavate you, most of them designed to say what it is that you want and what it is that you're after. What story is inside of you that never dies, that keeps coming up, keeps burbling up, and never dies? And it's it could be that that's the story that you need to bring forward. I listened to a lovely uh, children's author called Sharon Fink, I believe. I believe that's her name. And she, as a college student, wrote a story of a little rose, and she just kind of put it away. And that's the story she started publishing when she got to do her children's books. And so she built a career from a new career from that little story. Um, so effectively, uh, oh, and Julia Cameron, just getting back to Julia Cameron for a second. One of the things that she said that made such an impression on me, in her book, The Artist's Way, she said, "You're so willing to write your Oscar acceptance speech, but you're not willing to get up to go to 8 o'clock drama class." And so effectively, she she made a point on a truth that has to be brought out when it is that you're trying to bring something new into this world. You focus and concentrate on the results that you want, but you work like the Dickens in the meantime to get them. Um, the last point that I wanted to make was that don't let setbacks stop you, because it's the setbacks that sometimes challenge you to find a I feel a lot of times that it's the setbacks where the universe is testing you to see if you really want this. Is this something that you are really passionate about, to see it to the end? And I feel that the setbacks take uh, make us determined to become a better version of ourselves. It's, I know a- at the time I was going through multiple heartaches. Uh, it felt awful. And at the time I was experiencing them, I didn't feel like I wanted to share them with anybody. But I also know now that every one of the setbacks had an ability to strengthen me, strengthen my resolve, give me an ability to have more compassion for the people that I work with and for the people that I take and counsel and do the spiritual counseling with, the people that come to me for psychic readings. Um, it's absolutely amazing to me how many times I can give them answers to questions that have been maybe troubling them for eons, not only a short time, but eons, decades. And how many times I can give them a hope that where they never had hope before. In fact, one of my Reiki students said exactly that. She said, because I taught her Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, and she said when she walked in the door for Reiki 1, she walked in feeling hopeless. When she walked out, she felt hope. And that was an absolutely amazing statement. It was a lovely statement for her to make. And I have extreme gratitude for her that she was able to give me that kind of feedback for the class. And right now, I know every Reiki class that I have, I actually have I have to do a second class because I've got so many people signing up for it. Um, the last point that I wanted to make is don't let the setbacks stop you. And effectively, the as I've been sharing with you, does the setbacks give you uh, an ability to teach you how to over how to see the setbacks as obstacles rather than or maybe effectively, maybe no, obstacles is not the right term, as ways to solve a problem in a manner that it hasn't been solved before, rather than an obstacle that is just going to stop you dead in its tracks. I I do have I felt there was a period in my life where I felt I had nothing but setbacks, and but now, like I just said earlier, every single thing that has happened to me has happened for a reason. Every single thing I feel has made me a better person, has brought me challenges that effectively cleared out um, fears that I might have gotten stuck in before. And there's a lovely statement that says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But when the teacher is ready, the student appears. And I do tell my Reiki students that they should not be surprised if at the end of Reiki 3, after they've offered it for after a while, that they might feel inclined to become teachers of Reiki. Because as teachers, they can reach an audience that nobody else will reach. And the beauty is with the becoming a teacher of Reiki is that the reason that I particularly love it and the Metatronic healing that I do that was given to me by Archangel Metatron is that when I myself went looking for another method of healing, I did not want surgery. I did not want pills. I did not want side effects. And effectively, both of these and multiple other type of healing modalities, zero balancing, polarity therapy, healing touch, uh, Metatron's healing methods, um, all work on the same with the same thing. I'm going to end, and I do want to encourage you to go to Amazon.com. You can read this probably um, 44 pages of this for free. And so it will give you a beautiful uh, way to determine whether or not you want it or whether you'd like to present it to somebody that you know could make great use of it. I'm Alice Alicia Jones. I thank you for listening to this, and I wish you happy healing, and I wish you to own your power and have a great month. And I will see you at the end of next month again. Thank you, Alice.